I don't know why I'm here. I should have stayed away, given him the space I'd promised myself I'd give him, but I just couldn't. I couldn't bear the idea of him with someone else. Even now, watching them from a distance, pretending to be invisible, as if I could really fool anyone, is breaking my heart. That should be me sitting there, making him laugh, making him smile like that. But it's not. It's some girl I don't even know, someone his parents picked out because they think she's better for him, more suitable. I can't do this. I can't just stand here and watch him fall for someone else. Before I knew what I was doing, my legs started moving on their own and I found myself right at their table, both of them looking at me as if I had suddenly grown 3 heads. "Get up," I said in a voice barely recognized as my own. "Jin?" he said, unable to quite believe I was there. Like he didn't know what to make of it. I don't blame him. Hell, I didn't even know what I was doing. "Get up," I repeat, more insistent this time. I can see him hesitate, but then something in my expression must convince him because he slowly rises to his feet. The girl looked like she wanted to say something, but Day just gave her an apologetic glance, like he was sorry for whatever was about to happen, and followed me as I grabbed his hand and pulled him away from the table. I didn't look back. Hell, I didn't even give him the chance to ask what was going on. As soon as we were clear of the door, I spun him around and pushed him against the wall. "Jin, what are you?" he started to say, but I cut him off, my lips crashing against his in a kiss that was anything but gentle. It's desperate, hungry, and full of all the frustration and jealousy I had been holding back for so long. God, when did it all become so messed up? Flashback begins. About a year ago. I remember the first time I saw Day as if it was only yesterday. It was just another ordinary day at university. I was sitting in the cafeteria when I saw him. To be honest, I'm not sure why I even noticed him. Maybe it was because of his bright blue hair standing out like the beacon in the sea of a black and brown heads. Or maybe it was the way he kept his head down like he was trying to make himself invisible. Something about him caught my eye. He was in the year below me, a quiet introverted kid who always sat alone, usually at the corner of the table near the windows, where the sunlight hit just right, making his electric blue hair almost glow. And his book. God, he always had a book. I never saw him without one, always completely absorbed in it. Initially, it was strange. This sudden awareness of him, I wasn't used to being so fixated on someone, especially not someone like Day. I mean, he wasn't exactly the type of person who would usually catch my attention. He was too quiet, too reserved, almost like those Harry Potter ghosts drifting through the halls of the school. Hell, even they talked more than him. I remember how a few days after I first noticed him, I found myself in the library supposedly studying for a math test, but instead of focusing on my textbook, my eyes kept drifting to the corner of the room where he was sitting. I don't know what came over me, but I felt this sudden urge to talk to him. I wanted to know what he was reading, what kind of music he was listening to, and what made him tick. But I didn't. I just sat there, pretending to study while sneaking glances at him, my heart beating a little faster each time our eyes almost met. It made my heart flutter in ways it never had. At that moment, I knew it wasn't just some fleeting interest. It was more than that. I was drawn to him, inexplicably and undeniably. But of course, I didn't act on it. I mean, what was I supposed to do? Walk up to him and say, "Hey, I've been staring at you for a while now, and I think you're kind of fascinating?" Yeah, right. I wasn't that bold, so I buried it. Guess life had other plans. About 3 months later, "You hit me. You need to pay for the damages," the younger guy was saying, his voice loud and aggressive. The older man shook his head, his voice shaking as he replied, "But you were speeding. You came out of nowhere. I didn't even see you." It was common, such brawls in this part of the city. Even though it had entirely been that young dude's fault, he's gonna put it all on the old man's head just because he knows some rich guy around here. The younger guy loomed over the old man, demanding payment for a minor accident. He seemed ready to escalate things, and something in me snapped. Without thinking, I stepped in. "Hey!" I called out, catching their attention. "What's going on here?" The younger guy sneered. "None of your business. Move along." "It is my business," I shot back. "You were speeding, and this isn't his fault. You're the one who should pay." He stared at me, then scoffed. "Is this kid your lawyer?" The older man shook his head, but I wasn't backing down. "Keep this up, and I'm calling the police." That seemed to make him pause. After a tense moment, he muttered, "Whatever," and walked away, speeding off in his car. I turned to the older man. "Are you okay?" He nodded, clearly shaken but grateful. "Thanks to you. I don't know what I would have done without you. He tried to offer me money, but I refused. I didn't do this for a reward. He looked surprised and smiled softly. You're a good kid. The world could use more people like you. Thank you again. You're welcome, I said. Take care. A month later. Jin, Principal Kim finally said, not looking up from his papers. Do you know why I called you in today? I nodded, even though my mouth felt too dry to speak. I knew exactly why. It was the same reason he called me in last month and the month before that. Your tuition fees are overdue still. His voice was firm, but not unkind. I understand your situation, but the school has policies. We can't keep letting this slide. I know, sir, I mumbled, staring down at my worn-out sneakers. They were starting to look a little too small, just like everything else I own these days. I'm trying to get the money together. My mom's been sick, and I've been working after school, but it's been tough. Principal Kim sighed, setting down his papers and removing his glasses. He looked tired, like he didn't want this conversation either. Jin, you're our top student, and you've made it this far on a scholarship, but you still need to pay the rest of your fees. If you don't pay by the end of the month, we'll have no choice but to expel you. The word hit me hard. Expelled. I couldn't let that happen. My mom was counting on me to graduate and get a decent job. I'll pay it, sir, I said, trying to sound confident. Principal Kim gave me a long look before nodding. I hope so, Jin. It would be a shame to lose you. I nodded, too worried to speak, as I left. I nearly bumped into someone standing just outside the office. To my surprise, it was the old man from the other day. He seemed delighted to see me. Jin, is it? He said, his voice deep, in contrast to his feeble voice that day. Yes, sir, I replied, trying to sound respectful. What was he doing here? I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with Principal Kim, he said, crossing his arms over his chest. It sounds like you're in a bit of a financial bind. I bit the inside of my cheek, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't like I could deny it, not after what he just heard. Yes, sir, things have been difficult at home. The old man studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, almost to himself, as if he just made a decision. Come with me, he said, turning on his heel and striding down the hallway. I hesitated for a second before following him, my mind racing. What did he want with me? We walked in silence until we reached an empty classroom. The old man opened the door and gestured for me to enter. I stepped inside, feeling a little uneasy. He closed the door behind us and leaned against it, folding his arms again. He looked me over as if assessing something. I have a proposition for you. A proposition? I repeated, confused. Yes, I understand that you're having financial difficulties, and I'm willing to help you out. But in return, I need you to do something for me. I frowned, trying to figure out where this was going. What do you want me to do? He paused for a moment, then said, I want you to befriend my son, Day. I didn't expect to hear that, especially not from Day's father. I stared at Mr. Lee, confused. You want me to be friends with Day? That's right, he said, serious. Day is quiet and doesn't have many friends. My wife and I are worried about him. We think you can help him open up. But why me? I asked. I remember that day, Mr. Lee replied, and I've seen you around school, Jin. You're outgoing and well-liked. I think you could be a good influence on Day. It felt strange, even a little insulting, like I was supposed to magically fix Day's social life, but when Mr. Lee mentioned covering my tuition fees, I hesitated. How would this work? I asked. Spend time with Day. Help him come out of his shell. In return, I'll take care of your tuition for the year or any other financial help that you need. His offer was tempting, but it felt wrong, like I was being paid to be someone's fake friend. I don't know, I started, but Mr. Lee interrupted, handing me a card. Think about it, Jin. You need the money and Day needs a friend. Call me when you've decided. I took the card, feeling its weight in my hand. As I walked away, my mind spun. Was this a chance I couldn't pass up, or was I about to make a huge mistake? 3 days later. Hey Mom, I said, trying to sound upbeat, but my voice cracked as I saw her there lying surrounded by so many machines. Jin, she whispered, her eyes lighting up. You're here. I sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. The doctor came in shortly after, a serious look on his face. Mr. Jin, we need to talk, the doctor said. As soon as we went out of the room, the doctor spoke, cutting straight to the point. Your mother's condition has worsened. She needs urgent surgery right now. It's the only way to give her a fighting chance. My stomach dropped. The room seemed to spin as I tried to process the news. I knew the surgery was expensive, much more than I could ever imagine on my own. "Doctor, how much are we talking about?" I managed to ask. The doctor gave me a figure that made my heart race. It was far beyond what I had. It was times like these that made me miss Dad the most, but had Dad been here, Mom would have never fallen so sick trying to take care of us. As the doctor left to make arrangements, my mind raced. I thought back to Mr. Lee's offer. The money he was offering me wasn't just an opportunity, it was a lifeline. I knew what I had to do. Reluctantly, I pulled out my phone and opened the text thread with Mr. Lee. My fingers hesitated for a moment before typing out my response. "I accept the deal." The next week, I was supposed to make Day more social and confident. Easy, right? Wrong. It would have been easier if I had to teach the wall how to speak. "Hey Day, mind if I join you?" I asked, trying to sound casual as he was having lunch. He looked up surprised. Sure, I guess." I sat down, trying to make conversation. "So, how's your day going?" "Fine," he mumbled, focusing on his lunch. I tried a different angle. "I heard you're into video games. Got any recommendations?" He shrugged. "Not really." I couldn't keep the conversation going. I ended up awkwardly finishing my lunch and making my escape. A day later. Next, I thought I'd try the library. Day was buried in a pile of books, so I approached slowly, hoping not to startle him. "Hey Day, studying hard?" I asked, leaning over his shoulder. He glanced up, clearly annoyed. "I'm just reading." "Right, of course. I was thinking maybe we could—" "Sorry, I'm busy." He cut me off, turning back to his book. I left feeling like an idiot. At this point, I was seriously questioning if I could pull this off. A week later, after several failed attempts, I was sitting in the park feeling like I'd hit rock bottom. I saw Day walking his dogs. He had this look of contentment on his face, completely at ease. I hesitated but decided to give it one more shot. I approached him cautiously. "Hey Day, mind if I join you and the dogs?" I asked, trying to sound as nonchalant as possible. He looked up, and for the first time he didn't seem annoyed or frustrated. "Sure, if you don't mind the mess." I followed him, and we walked together, the dogs bounding around us. We started talking about the puppies, and surprisingly, he opened up a bit. "I used to have a dog when I was younger," I said, trying to connect. "It was a golden retriever. Best buddy I ever had." Day looked at me, his eyes softening. "I've had these guys since they were pups. They're a handful, but I love them." We talked more about the dogs, and for the first time, it felt like we were having a real conversation. However, it was suddenly broken as one of the puppies ran towards the road. "Hey, watch out!" I shouted, but the puppy didn't seem to hear me. It was too busy chasing a butterfly, oblivious to the danger it was heading towards. Day was standing at the edge of the yard, yelling for the puppy to come back. His voice was filled with panic. "Rue, come back!" he screamed, but Rue was too far gone now. I could see a car speeding down the road, its driver totally unaware of the tiny dog in its path. Without thinking, I sprinted toward the puppy. My legs felt like lead as I ran, but I couldn't let that little guy get hit. I could see the car approaching, its headlights glaring. I reached the puppy just in time, scooping it up and tucking it under my arm. I barely had time to breathe before I felt a sharp pain in my side, and everything went black. 2 days later. When I woke up, I was lying in a hospital bed. My body felt like it had been through a war zone. I tried to sit up, but immediately winced in pain and flopped back down. The door to my room creaked open, and I saw Day standing there, his face pale and eyes red from crying. He rushed to my side. "Jin, you're awake!" His voice cracked, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Day, what happened?" I croaked, my throat dry. "You got hit by a car," Day said, his voice trembling. "You saved Rue. I can't believe you did that." I tried to smile, but it hurt too much. "Rue okay?" I managed to ask. Day nodded vigorously. "Yeah, Rue's fine, a little shaken up, but he's okay. I don't know what I would have done if something happened to him." I could see the guilt and fear in his eyes. "You don't need to thank me. It was my fault for not paying closer attention." Day shook his head. "No, it's not your fault. You risked your life for him." He stopped, taking a deep breath to compose himself. "I was so scared, I thought I lost him." He sat down next to my bed. "You've been out for 2 days. The doctor said you have a concussion and some bruised ribs. You should have seen the way my parents and, I panicked when they heard about the accident." "I'm sorry," I said softly. Day shook his head again. "I'm sorry for being so cold when you've been nothing but kind to me." I didn't know what to say. I was still processing his words when a nurse came in to check on me. She adjusted my blankets and checked my vitals before saying, "You are doing much better now." At this, I saw Day smile. Genuine smile that made his eyes sparkle. I looked at him in awe, feeling a warmth in my chest that wasn't there before. 4 weeks later. Since the accident, Day started opening up to me. Slowly, and before we knew it, we had become close, closer than I ever expected. And though it's great for the deal I have made, I wouldn't say that there aren't risks. "Hey Day," I said, walking up to him one day. He looked up, surprised, and then his face broke into that shy smile I'd come to adore. "Oh, hey Jin, I didn't see you there." "Yeah, I've been here for a bit, just didn't want to interrupt," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Mind if I join you?" "Not at all," he said, patting the empty space on the bench next to him. I sat down, trying to keep my thoughts focused on the task at hand. This wasn't supposed to be about me getting feelings, but there was something about Day that made it impossible to keep things strictly business. We sat in silence for a few minutes, just watching people walk by. I glanced at Day, who was now looking at me with those curious blue eyes. "So," he started, breaking the silence, "how are things going with everything?" "Oh, you know," I said, shrugging, "just trying to get through school and all that. Nothing too exciting." He nodded, and then his gaze dropped back to his book. I couldn't help but notice how comfortable he seemed, how much he had opened up since we first started hanging out. It wasn't just about the deal anymore. I was genuinely enjoying his company, and that realization was hitting me harder than I expected. "Hey Jin," Day said suddenly, breaking into my thoughts. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure, what's up?" I asked. "Why did you decide to be friends with, well, me?" His voice trailed off, and he looked at me with this vulnerable expression. I took a deep breath. This wasn't something I was prepared to talk about. "Well, at first, you looked cold, but, I guess I always knew I'd enjoy spending time with you." Day looked surprised. "You mean you actually like hanging out with me?" "Yeah, I do," I said, feeling my face warm up. "You're not like I thought. I knew you were shy, but you're different, in a good way." Day smiled, and the warmth in his expression made my heart race. I never thought someone would say that about me. "Well, I guess we're both surprising," I said, trying to ease the moment. He chuckled softly, and for a moment, everything felt right. "Do you ever think about the future? What do you want to do after school?" Day asked. Caught off guard, I shrugged. "I haven't really thought that far. I'm just trying to get through each day." "Yeah, I get that," Day nodded. "But it's nice to think about the future sometimes." We fell into a quiet moment, and I realized I wasn't just thinking about the deal anymore. I was thinking about Day. Day shifted on the bench and leaned in a little closer to me. "You know, Jen, I'm really glad you came into my life as a friend, but..." I turned to look at him, our faces inches apart. "Yeah?" He hesitated for a moment before continuing. "But it feels like you're actually a lot more than just a friend now, and that means a lot to me." My heart pounded. I wanted to tell him everything. How I had fallen for him despite the deal. How he had become more important to me than I ever thought possible. But all I could do was nod, trying to convey everything in that one simple gesture. "Me too, Day," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Me too." As we sat there, the world seemed to fade away. It was just me and Day, and for the first time I realized that this was no longer just about fulfilling a promise. It was about something much deeper, something I hadn't fully understood until now. And in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I was falling for him, deal or no deal. Flashback into present day. I had been dreading this day ever since Mr. Lee set up the date for Day and that girl. Not only did they set him up with one of their friend's daughter, but they had to ask me to convince him. If only they knew what I felt for their son. Well, I guess they would kick me out of his life in an instant. They aren't really the type who could accept or even understand feelings like this. So instead of being away as I had promised myself, I not only ruined their date but kissed him too. And kissed him so desperately as if that alone would be enough to explain it all. For a moment, he doesn't react, and I think I've made a horrible mistake. But then, just as suddenly, I feel him respond. His lips move against mine, tentative at first, but then more certain, more eager. Honestly, for a moment, I forgot everything else. The date, the expectations, the reasons behind why I was here. All I could focus on was Day's lips moving against mine. The warmth of his body close to mine. I felt his hands resting lightly on my arms as if he was grounding himself in this unexpected moment. When I finally pulled away, we were both breathing heavily. Day looked at me with a mixture of shock and something softer, something like hope. Jin, what happened? He asked tentatively. I started, but I wasn't sure what to say. We should go, I said finally, trying to regain some semblance of control. My voice was almost a whisper, but it felt heavy with the weight of what just happened. Day nodded slowly, his eyes still locked on mine. He didn't say anything, but I could see the questions and emotions swirling in his gaze. We went to the car in silence. I could feel Day's eyes on me, but I couldn't bring myself to look back. I was afraid of what I might see, or what he might say. We drove back to my place without exchanging a word, the tension between us almost palpable. When we arrived, I parked the car and turned to face Day. He was still silent, his expression unreadable. Day, I started again, but he cut me off. Jin, what was that? He asked softly. There was a hint of vulnerability in his voice that made my heart ache. I don't know, I admitted, feeling a lump in my throat, and before he could ask me anything more, I left him standing there alone to deal with the mess I had created. 3 weeks later. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe Day would understand why I pulled him away from his date and kissed him, or maybe he'd hate me for it. Either way, I couldn't shake the guilt that had settled in my chest, so I did what I did best, distance myself from him. I avoided Day for the next couple of weeks, hoping maybe the feelings would sort themselves out, but he didn't let it go. Not Day. He kept trying to talk to me, sending me messages and calling. I'd ignore them all, my mind a mess of confusion and regret. But he didn't give up. So there I was, sitting alone in an empty courtyard nearing my house, trying to clear my head. It wasn't long before I saw Day storming towards me. His face was set with determination. He stopped in front of me, his blue eyes fierce. Jin, he said, his voice cracking a little. We need to talk. I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling the weight of his gaze. Day, I don't think now's the best time. No, he said firmly. Now is exactly the time. You've been avoiding me for days. What's going on? I sighed, looking down at my shoes. I messed up, Day. I shouldn't have what? He cut in. Kissed me or avoided me afterwards? I don't understand. Why did you pull me away like that? What does it even mean? His words hit me hard. I could see the hurt in his eyes, and it made my stomach churn. It means... I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Sorry for what? His voice was barely above a whisper, but it was sharp. For kissing me? For pretending to be my friend? I looked at him, my heart pounding. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Jin? He demanded. I felt my throat close up. Day, I love you. Before he could say anything, the sound of footsteps interrupted us. I looked up to see Mr. and Mrs. Lee walking towards us. They looked serious, and my stomach dropped. Day, Mr. Lee said, his tone icy. What's going on here? Day's face went pale as he saw his parents. I was just talking to Jin. Mrs. Lee's gaze moved between us, her expression darkening. I think we need to have a word with Jin. My heart raced. I glanced at Day, who looked confused and anxious. I knew this was about to get worse. What's the problem? Day asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Mr. Lee took a deep breath. We need to discuss the situation with Jin. We were under the impression he was helping you out, but seems like he's influencing you the wrong way. The way he said it made me feel like I was about to be thrown under the bus. I couldn't let this turn into something worse for Day. Look, Mr. Lee, Mrs. Lee, I started, but Mrs. Lee cut me off. Don't bother now, she said. You broke the arrangement. Day's eyes widened. Arrangement? Yes, Mr. Lee said. We hired Jin to be your friend and help you become more social. We were paying him to do this. Day looked at me with shock and betrayal. Is it true, Jin? Were you only pretending to be my friend for money? I felt my face flush with shame. Day, Is it true? He demanded, his voice rising. I nodded, feeling like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. Yeah, it's true. I took the money because I needed it. Day's expression was a mix of hurt and anger. So everything between us, it was all just a lie? No, I said, stepping closer to him. It started that way, but it changed. I didn't mean for it to... Day shook his head, tears welling up in his eyes. I can't believe this. I'm sorry, I said, my voice breaking. I really am. I wanted to be there for you, but I messed up. Mrs. Lee stepped forward. We should have known better than to trust someone like you. You're a bad influence on our son. Mom, Dad, stop, Day cried out. This isn't helping. Mr. Lee's face was a mask of disappointment. We trusted you, Jin. We thought you were a good person, but you've been taking advantage of us. I never meant to hurt anyone, I said, feeling completely overwhelmed. I'm really sorry. Before they could say more, I turned and walked away, my heart heavy with regret. I heard Day call out after me, but I didn't stop. I needed to get away, to clear my head. I knew I messed up big time. 4 days later. The next few days were a blur. Day tried reaching out to me, but I couldn't bring myself to face him. Finally, he came to my house, desperate for answers. I saw him talking to my mom and little sister, and I knew he must have learned a lot more about me than I ever wanted. Seeing him there, I felt a mix of relief and dread. We needed to talk, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. As I reached, after quick pleasantries with my mom, we headed to my room. "Day," I said, my voice cracking as soon as I closed the door behind. "What are you doing here?" Day looked up, his face a mix of frustration and sadness. "I've been calling you. I came to talk." I had no answer, so I just stood there, quietly. "Why didn't you tell me?" Day finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of his question. "Day, I talked to your mom," he interrupted. "She told me about your family situation, about how you needed the money for your mom's treatment." I sighed. "Yeah, it's true. I didn't want to drag you into that mess. I just wanted to do the right thing, but I got in too deep." Day's eyes softened a little. "I get that now. I understand why you took the deal, but it doesn't make it okay to lie to me. I need to know, was everything we had fake? Was the kiss fake?" I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Day, no, the kiss wasn't fake. None of it was. I genuinely liked you, and things started to feel real. I didn't know how to handle it because I was already in too deep with the deal." Day looked at me, his gaze searching. "Then why did you push me away after that kiss?" "I was scared," I admitted. "I was afraid of what would happen if you found out the truth. I thought it would ruin everything we built." Day's face fell. "You should have trusted me. I wouldn't have reacted the way that you thought. I was hurt, but not because of the money. It's because you kept me in the dark." "I know," I said quietly, "and I'm sorry. I should have been honest with you from the start. I didn't want to lose you, and I didn't want to be burden on you. I thought maybe if you knew, you'd see me differently." Day took a moment to process what I'd said. "So what does this mean for us now? Are we still a thing?" I felt a surge of hope. "I hope so, I really do. I care about you a lot, Day. I want to make things right if you'll give me a chance." Day's expression softened, though he still looked uncertain. I reached out and took his hand. I want to make this right. I am sorry for everything." Day squeezed my hand, his eyes reflecting a mix of relief and hesitation. "Okay, let's start fresh. No more secrets." I nodded vigorously. "No more secrets, I promise." A week later, I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw Day and I walking down the street together, hand in hand. It felt like we were finally on the same page after all the drama. The night was cool and everything seemed perfect. I even managed to get Day to laugh at a few of my lame jokes. It was the first time in a while that I felt like things were right in my life. But then, as we rounded the corner near the park, I froze. There, leaning against a tree with a scowl on his face, was Mr. Lee. I recognized him instantly. My heart sank. What was he doing here? Day noticed it too. His eyes widened when he saw his dad. "Oh no," he muttered. Mr. Lee stormed over, his face furious. "Jin!" he barked, his voice sharp. I swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. "Mr. Lee, are you seriously still involved with my son?" His voice was low but filled with anger. "After everything, you're still here, clinging to him like a leech?" I felt my face heat up. Don't even try to justify yourself," Mr. Lee cut me off. "You've done enough damage. I trusted you to help Day, and you've taken advantage of him." Before I could respond, Day stepped in front of me, determined. "Dad, stop it. You're not being fair." Mr. Lee snapped. "Fair? I catch you with him, and I'm not being fair?" Day took a deep breath, his voice shaking but steady. "Yes, because you don't understand. Jin isn't just a hired friend. He's been there for me. He's helped me." Mr. Lee's expression didn't soften. "You think a kiss and a few good times make up for what he's done?" "It's not about a kiss," Day shot back. "He's helped me come out of my shell. Been there when I needed someone. If you can't see that, then maybe you're the one who's being unfair." Mr. Lee's anger flickered into confusion. "But you don't know if he's genuine. He's being paid to be your friend." Day shook his head. "Yes, he was paid, but that doesn't make what he's done for me fake. I know he was helping his family, and I've seen him struggle. He's not just in this for the money." I saw the pain in Day's eyes. It hurt to see him defend me so fiercely. I wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Mr. Lee looked conflicted, his voice softer. Day, I just want what's best for you. Day's tone gentled but stayed firm. And right now, Jin is part of what's best for me. You can't treat him like the enemy. Mr. Lee's shoulders sagged as he looked at me with frustration and regret. I didn't realize. I just want you to be safe and happy. Day's voice softened even more. I am safe and happy, Dad, because of Jin. Mr. Lee glanced between us, his anger melting into contemplation. All right, I'll give you both space, but Jin, this is your last chance. Don't make me regret trusting you. I nodded, relieved. I understand. I won't let you down. Mr. Lee turned to leave, casting one last look over his shoulder. He didn't say anything, but the tension had eased. Day smiled at me, small but genuine. Thanks for standing up for me, I said. He shrugged, his smile still there. Of course, you've done so much for me, it's the least I could do. As we walked away hand in hand, I felt hopeful. Things wouldn't be perfect, but with Day beside me, I knew we would face anything together. Conclusion. As the weeks passed, Day and I found our rhythm together. We faced a few bumps along the way, but we tackled them as a team. Mr. Lee came around, slowly accepting our relationship and even starting to warm up to me. Day's confidence grew every day, and I couldn't be prouder of him. We spent more time with each other's families, creating new memories and deepening our bond. Our journey wasn't always easy, but it was real. Looking ahead, I'm excited for the future with Day. Whatever comes our way, I know we'll handle it together. Our story is just beginning, and I can't wait to see where it leads. The end. Would you have forgiven Jin if you were Day? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.